right? There are plenty of people on the white identitarian side, i.e. Nazis, that try to utilize moments like this specifically to make counter propaganda. This is why I can't stop defending, not necessarily defending anti-white racism or anything like that, but explaining the concept that anti-white racism or reverse racism is not a valid or real thing. It's like, anti-straight bigotry. Homophobia is real. Heterophobia is not, because heterophobia is considered the default position. Okay? Does that mean you can hurt a white person's feelings? Yeah, of course you can. Does that mean that white people can be oppressed? Of course they can be. There is a layer of intersectionality. They can be oppressed for a multitude of different reasons. Most significantly, though, from their class position. Okay?
Peace. The answer to the part 1 pop quiz question is, the artist is Uncle Kracker, the group is with attitude. Though there's a reason that the group is more widely known and referred to by their acronym, NWA, while to the contrary, in the mainstream, Uncle Kracker is simply known as Uncle Kracker. Because there's no genuine one-to-one comparison between cracker and the N-word. Not etymologically, not historically, not socially, not sincerely. The term cracker is an old Anglo-Saxon word that's been around.
You can't hate the default. That doesn't make sense. No, default implies power. So it doesn't matter if there's any sort of like negativity associated with it. And in many instances, the negativity towards the normative position or the default is criticism towards power. So it's not about criticism towards you specifically, okay? But yes, when you shit on power, it's like saying fuck billionaires. You can't oppress the default on the basis of that default. Exactly. This is a concept that we've talked about so many times. I feel like it's very hard for people to just like hear what I'm saying. Like people just shut off, and I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. Right? Hear my words, but you don't listen to what I'm saying.
Around for centuries, published as early as the 1500s in the work of Shakespeare. Its original meaning was one who brags, a bloviator. In today's terms, a capper. Ethnocentrism among the English applied the term cracker to the Scots-Irish people to smear them as raucous and lawless. That stereotype and label would follow the Scots-Irish people to the New World, the Americas, where they took on many manual labor jobs, including drovers,
which, by the way, whiteness from the American perspective, like from the American understanding of whiteness, the Scots-Irish were considered non-white, not a part of the default in-group. They were not white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which is why when cracker applied to them as a negative slur, it was applied to them on the basis of them not being, I guess, quote-unquote, white. When Italians were oppressed in this country, they were not considered white. When the Irish were oppressed in this country, or in the second iteration of the word cracker, when he's describing the etymology of it, they were not white. And when I say white, I mean, we all know that these people had white skin. It's not like these people aren't white, right? And these people are certainly now considered white. But that concept has expanded, okay? It has expanded throughout time to welcome other groups that were originally oppressed on the virtue of not being white to now be white. Notice how none of these people were discriminated against on the basis of being white and white alone, in the same way that a black person or a brown person can be discriminated against. That's because whiteness in this regard has very little to do with the color of your skin, unless we're talking about the color of your skin being black, okay? Because if there's one group of people who will never be considered white, it's black people. That's why Barack Obama is not another white president, despite being half white, but considered the first black president. The reason why I have to, I guess, consistently repeat myself on the subject is that it's also a hyper-Americentric conversation to have, because in other countries, there's slurs and pejoratives and arguments that happen and occur on the basis of religious backgrounds, religious sectarianism, ethnocentrism, but rarely ever on the same white versus non-white boundaries that you constantly talk about in the United States of America. It's very interesting. That's why a lot of Europeans will look to this situation and go, what the fuck? Why? They'll say, why are Americans so obsessed with race? Now, of course, this does not mean that there isn't anti-black racism in European countries. Of course there are. But the never-ending argument, the never-ending back and forth between whiteness, what that means, white people, black people, is a profoundly American conversation to have.
Where they took on many manual labor jobs, including drovers, which introduces another connotation to the term cracker as whip cracker, which transfers over to the context of slavery with Scots-Irish participation as slave foremen who cracked the whip. In time, the Scots-Irish people would embrace the term cracker as a thing of pride. Although to northern and affluent whites, the term cracker was a classist smear, the southern crackers themselves embraced the term as a sign of their working class grit. There's even a book about it called Cracker Culture that reveals something that you might find.
That's why people in Florida also call themselves the Florida Crackers too.
And surprising. While all poor Southern whites were considered crackers, not all crackers were white. That's right. Before the Atlanta Braves, there was the Atlanta Crackers. And alongside the Atlanta Crackers were the Atlanta Black Crackers. And you might argue that was then and this is now. Well, as of now, there's still a Cracker Trail Elementary School in Florida, a school that honors the Cracker Trail landmark in Florida. There's the Cracker Roadshow that again celebrates cracker culture. There's a reason you will not find in this day and age an N-word Trail Elementary School, because the N-word and cracker are not the same. That said, yes.
Well, there is a N-word Head Ranch, though, and everybody understands how fucking profoundly racist that is, because there's no terminology that is like positive. There's no positive association with the N-word in that regard.
Context and connotation can turn even the most benign term into a racial insult. For example, white supremacist appropriation of the word Monday as interchangeable with the N-word. No one would argue that Monday, in and of itself, is racist. It depends on the context of use. Even the mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging racist, who blew a gasket at my Andy Griffith post and went on a racist tirade. When he came back and posted an unapologetic video, he used the term cracker in his video. At no point in time did he repeat any of the anti-black slurs that he previously had.
Like, that guy's a Nazi, and even he uses the term cracker, but now LSF and like Redditors on specific subreddits have decided to be logically consistent and start saying that like cracker is such a slur, it's such a serious slur, that like they started censoring it, which is hilarious. Okay? You are trying to be more fragile about a white identity that you do not understand than a fucking Nazi, the ultimate white identitarian. Like, Nazis are at the literal last, the final boss of white identity. Okay? Straight up. So it's crazy to like turn around and try to censor the word cracker specifically so that you can, get an argument in edgewise. It's a very silly situation. But words are defined socially, and maybe in the future, if there's enough white fragility, people could potentially genuinely create a movement surrounding the censorship of the word cracker. It's laughable. It's hilarious. Okay? But the historical association with the word, the etymology of the word, and the difference of said word or words that pertain to white people will never change, because those things already happened. Okay?
In the video that he deleted, because even he knows the two are not the same. But I know that nothing that I've said in this video is going to ever satisfy some of you. And quite frankly, I'm good with that. How good? This good.
Good cracker.
We out ya.
Anyway. So yeah. When the goblins go to larger, more popular subreddits and try to spread this message, they get laughed at and told to fuck off, so they return to LSF and adjacent subreddits. Yeah. It's scary. The reason why I consider this to be genuinely threatening and scary is because it's a gateway, an entry point into white identitarian politics. And when you start doing white identitarian politics, you start opening up the door to more white identitarian politics, like the guy that we were talking about here, Nazis. In 2016, or even before that, in the Gamergate era, one of the things that Richard Spencer and the like often utilized was white identitarian politics. This is not a new concept. Historically speaking, white power came after black power. The Klan and other adjacent nationalist fascist movements saw black power and decided to basically market what they were doing in a similar vein. Now, of course, this works well for some people who are either otherwise well-intentioned and don't fully understand it. Play the video? What video? I already played the video. Yeah, All Lives Matter and Thin Blue Line came after Black Lives Matter. We now know and understand that All Lives Matter on its face sounds totally normal, innocuous even. White Lives Matter is the more racist, more transparently racist. No, there is no 30 seconds left. I went back in the video. Anyway. If you check the history of who makes the comments, you've got a 50% chance of finding an out-about race realist. They don't even hide it, and gullible-ass libs just eat it up hook, line, and sinker. Yes. Exactly. A lot of people that are permanently online, extremely online, love to use this as an opportunity to spear dick their narrative. They're much, much worse and much scarier ideas into the fold, into the conversation, as they present it as someone who is simply interested in, stopping people from being mean to one another, stopping people from being racist to one another. Maybe there are some people who also are extremely online who get caught up in that narrative and get caught up in that argument with good intentions without realizing it. But ultimately, there is no difference. White identitarianism, given that whiteness is a socio-political concept created around having power, okay? White identitarianism is no different than just basically being the entry steps, the gateway into, further, more aggressive and scary forms of white identitarianism. Nazi shit. Like I said, though, I understand why XQC specifically, I can't speak on Asmon, but I assume Asmon has a similar perspective on it as well. But, look. Racism against white people, okie dokie, you slay queen. Racism against black people, how could you? How much does your house cost again, Hasan? Frat laugh. Yeah. These are always the same kinds of people. They're not interested in legitimately making the internet a safer space for people. Okay? They're just interested in making an argument so they can basically say the N-word. And if I can't say it, then you can't make fun of white people. If I can't make fun of black people and you consider me to be racist when I do that, then you can't make fun of white people. The whole victim complex of white identitarians and Nazis just melts my brain like you were never a victim, dude. What the fuck? That's not true. That's also not true. Even Nazis, white identitarians, at a certain point in time could have been victimized. And White people in general are also capable of being victimized. White people can still be, for example, victims of police brutality. White people, of course, can be victims of unjustifiable constructs, unjustifiable hierarchies, just not on the basis of being white. That's it. You are always going to be structurally fucked over on the virtue of being a worker, a laborer. Your class position is the reason why you get fucked over. Like I said, though, in the conversation that XQC, myself, and Your Rage had, XQC also admitted that the word cracker is not something that offends him. As a white person, he understands that it's a silly, laughable concept. In private conversations that we've had, which I also mentioned in that conversation, so I don't feel bad revealing it one more time or describing it one more time. He understands, just like he doesn't use the R word, for example, XQC does not use the R word. He understands that allowing it to continue or advocating for it, advocating to say it, will create an unsafe space and will make it seem like you can just go balls to the wall. Okay? The R word, LMFAO. Well, yes. Problem is that any racial insults and hatred will ultimately create more hatred and division. Isn't it better to speak out against hatred across the board while acknowledging that certain types are more harmful than others? Well, here's the issue. When I talk about the word cracker, I talk about it from the context of historical white supremacy and its contemporary implications. Okay? I am not going to concede or capitulate to people who are making a silly argument saying that their feelings are hurt. Because those people will be quick to say, well, what about black people? When you say anti-black things, you're hurting their feelings, but you care about their feelings. It seems like you don't care about white people's feelings. And that is either a deliberate misdirection or in the most charitable way, in the most charitable interpretation, that is someone who doesn't get it. Okay? No one is making that argument. The argument being made is permitting racism is wrong despite the impact. Yes, I understand why content creators take a stance on this. I understand why content creators don't want people to just like fucking constantly spam cracker in their chats. Okay? I get that. But that logic does not apply. To words like Karen, redneck, hillbilly, honky, and numerous other anti-white words. A lot of those words also are not on the virtue of whiteness, but usually whiteness plus class. Or an action, a type of behavior. Okay? The way I see it, I, as a white person who also appreciates humor and who thinks that, we shouldn't be so aggressive in our understanding of comedy. I, as a white person who regularly yell at chatters. Oh, look at that hill, a dead Hasan. Yeah, I know. I'm so dead. I know. It's interesting that people say this, and yet I am still alive. Do you want to know why? It's the very same reason that this, no matter how much people try to fucking claim that anti-white racism is completely unacceptable, completely crazy, or whatever the fuck, a Nabisco-owned brand like Wheat Thins can make like a marketing campaign around it and send me a cracker pass. because everyone understands that this is a laughable concept. The only people that don't understand that this is a laughable concept, or the people that take this seriously, are unfortunately people who are either brain broken from the circles that they engage with on the internet, or people who are maliciously and very deliberately trying to create outrage surrounding the term so that they can, push you further into and deliberately push you further into white identitarian politics, which is Nazi ideology. Concepts like the Great Replacement are immediately planted into that conversation so quickly, or concepts such as, why can't I say it? Why can't I say the N-word, for example? Okay? It never just stays at like, oh, this is like racism and hatred towards white people. You understand? Yes, an actual cracker company sent me this. Whiteness did. Kind of revealing that when white people cite examples of anti-white oppression, it's always a benefit. They're not a party to, as opposed to an action targeting them, affirmative action improving the condition of minorities in general, etc. Yes. Can we also mention how a lot of these people complaining about anti-white racism but refuse to stand up for BLM and other issues? Yeah, I mean, of course not, because it's because a lot of the people who make a big deal about the anti-white racism stuff is that, a lot of the people that make a big deal about anti-white racism, unfortunately, not every single one, but a lot of those people just care about either debating or just care about, creating outrage, and maybe even in more nefarious cases, trying to push a narrative that at the top of the hour there's a 3-minute ad break. And that narrative is true. However, if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. If you no longer want to see those ads, you can also get gifted a sub, like the 5 subs that Woke Moralist just gifted, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads. Right-wing propaganda of this sort is very nefarious and sometimes very effective. Andrea Streeter, Aisha Esquire, thank you for the 10 of the subs. Andrea Streeter also brings up a really good point. It truly comes down to the fact that, yes, repeating mean words towards white people can definitely be annoying and bullying, but it stops there. If people are saying slurs towards black people, even if they don't know the history behind the words, it's there and it's racist. It doesn't stop there, and you're a fool if you think so. You are not going to find any examples of systemic violence that white people have been subjected to, because white people have dominated. And when I say white, I mean Anglo-Saxons and the Western world. That's why you have to potentially travel to a different country to experience some form of discrimination. I'm sorry. Or you're going to have to talk about South Africa, which ironically was an apartheid state until not that long ago. And even the remnants of that unfair distribution of wealth and equity still very much exists in South Africa, where white people, which make up 10% of the South African population, which, by the way, how do they get there? There's a long history of that. We're not going to get into it currently. But the 10% of white people own 90% of the land. the most viable land in South Africa. Still, they're no longer in an apartheid state. And yet, the cultural and material remnants of said distribution and disenfranchisement on the basis of being black or being white still remains. Sick of these stupid Redditors. Only place these guys exist, I swear to God, who act like saying the big C is a slippery slope into white people slavery. It's hilarious. This community is a very white community. I am pretty fucking pasty white myself. Invictus 13, thank you for the 10 gifted subs. Asmon tried using Japan as an example. Oh, this was pretty funny too. Remember, people tried to like make it seem like my statements about Japan was a indication that I do not take, anti-white racism seriously, which is, yes, I am white and I did go to Japan. And yes, Japan is pretty xenophobic. They tried to clip me out of context on a joke as I am a white person. So to the normie, I'm sure when they watch me talk about this, they go, what? That's a white dude making a joke. But on a subreddit where you want to be as uncharitable as possible, you can turn around and make this argument that like Hasan is an anti-white racist. I'm white, bro. I'm fucking white.
They argue you can't be racist against white people because white people have more privilege and power. Well, yeah, but like nobody would say that you're not being racist if you go to Japan and India, where Indian people and Japanese people have all the power, and then you're racist.
In a lot of these places, by the way, they still do horrific, as a consequence of colonial culture. Okay, as a consequence of like colonialism, India is a great example of this, and imperial powers interacting and subjugating these countries. Japan, there is still colorism. Like if you look at India, it's a great example. India is a great example. In India, they have infinitely more racist ass fucking ads, like skin whitening ads and shit. But once again, yeah, India has a caste system. Both your and Asmon chatters a constant stir shit between you guys. They clip you both to drive their thirst for drama. I know, I understand, which is why I always have the secondary position, which is like, why you have to be mad? Because I think every single person deep down inside that is like on the content creation side that talks about this issue, all the way from XQC to Asmongold to whoever, kind of understands that like, it's not as severe. Everyone ultimately recognizes that there is a difference. There is a varying degree of discrimination. Okay? And the people that are like taking this incredibly seriously and not finding it to be like productive discourse, but instead like white people are under attack, they're going to be gunned down in the streets and be sold into white slavery. Okay? Those people are fucking freaks.
Racist to them, and then Indians or Japanese tell you to get the fuck out. That would immediately be racist. Everybody would agree that's racist. So if it's built off of a structure of power, then logically you would be able to be racist against people in other countries if they're the majority population. But you can't because it's ridiculous. Again, the only real reason why people want to be able to...
I wonder which country maintained almost complete control over India, or which country wrote the Constitution of Japan, for example. Like, even in the examples that he's giving, when you look at the historical impact, when you look at like the recent and also not so recent history and the development of nation states in these countries, Western influence that is white ethnocentric is so prominent that it's impossible to avoid. Of course. And that's precisely why, even in those countries, when they have like xenophobic sentiments, for example, towards white people, and I wouldn't say that they do in India, but certainly in Japan, Japan is pretty xenophobic. Japan was also a colonial power themselves, yes, also true. That level of xenophobic discrimination, is still, it still lacks the oomph, because the United States of America is the global hegemonic superpower. And whatever we say goes. Okay?
To do it is because they're racist. Just assume that the people that want to use racial slurs with the intended effect of them being used against that race of people in a degrading way, just assume that the reason why they want to do that is because they're racist. They argue you can't be racist.
Japanese did not treat the Chinese very nicely, for example. No, they did not. The sentiment that we have to do genocide, to prevent genocide happening to white people, is used as common excuse by fascism. The Nazis claimed they were doing self-defense against the German race. I know. That's why it's very insidious and very scary when people start talking about like defending the white race without realizing it. A lot of people lend themselves to and take on the battle with those who claim that white genocide is occurring. And you have to understand, one question you should always ask, one question I have for Asmongold is this, and everyone else, is this: how is white genocide happening? What is white replacement? Why is it a bad thing? Because once you start identifying that, once you start thinking about that, you start to recognize, oh, it's happening through miscegenation, which is now legal, no matter how much people try to, chirp against that too. It's happening because there's no more genetic purity in the white genes. Okay? Are we really ascribing Asmon believes any of these things? No, of course not. That's why I'm saying that no. He's singularly critiquing individual actions, not systemic ones. Exactly. That's precisely why I'm stating what I'm stating, which is that when you start defending white identitarian concepts, you very quickly, without recognizing, because you're refusing to recognize that like whiteness is power, okay, in the way that it is defined. It's an in-group that has the power. So once you start defending that in-group that has the power as something that needs to be defended, you have to recognize that, like, how do you do that defense? How do you engage in defending the white race? Who do you consider to be white? And I don't think Asmongold would be like, yeah, white replacement is real, or, white genocide is real, and that we have to defend it by stopping miscegenation. You know what I mean? That's how that works. Wouldn't it be good to address the critiques of singular actors as bad in order to dismiss the arguments against what you're saying effectively? No. Because, like I've said time and time again, the fundamentals that argument lands on, the fundamentals that argument starts on are false. It's a false premise that I will not take on as a genuine, real concept. Do you not get this? I'm not saying it's good to constantly shit on white people or whatever the fuck. I'm simply stating that I refuse to acknowledge that anti-white racism is a real thing. Do you get it? Because in order to acknowledge that it's a real thing, you have to acknowledge that there is a concept of white race, which comes from your genetic purity, and it comes from your lineage, not from skin color, by the way, because those who are like the true whites will always be able to shut off whiteness, not on the basis of your skin color, like myself, right? But on other factors, like, oh, you're Turkish, your name is Hasan, you're no longer white. How dare you engage in anti-white racism? You yourself are not a white person. Do you get it? Because defending whiteness as a concept, given what whiteness is, power is a socio-political term that implies you have it, okay? What you are saying is true, but not everyone sees it that way. Well, what I say is true and not everyone sees it that way could be applied to a multitude of things I advocate for, but I don't stop advocating for those things because I believe them, and my entire goal here is to try to get people to engage with me charitably and develop a better perspective on what I'm trying to say. If you refuse to acknowledge it, why talk about it? Because I'm a political commentator, and this is a incredibly political subject, especially in America. For example, when we look at historic genocide, let's look at the Holocaust, for example. The Holocaust did not happen on the virtue of Jewish people not having sex. Okay? It happened because people put Jewish people in concentration camps. Okay? Bro, do not pause like that. He said the Holocaust didn't happen. Okay, guys, come on. Be serious. Be serious. Be serious. Be serious. Please. Please. I like half of you guys are behaving in the worst way. This is a very serious conversation that we're having. Like, why do you lend credence to hate watchers by behaving like LARPing as hate watchers? Lecturing single chatters for 15 minutes at a time is so tiring, though, like yesterday. It might come across as tiring, but I think it's very important to address it. Most white people in the U.S. absolutely do not see themselves as a group. They have a kind of terminally corrupting individualistic view, which is why class unifying political movements are so fucking hard to get moving here. That's why it seems to miss the critiques of this kind of racist language, because the argument isn't that whites deserve protection, but all racism is condemnable. Yes. But anti-white racism as an individual action is nothing more than mean bullying. Anti-black racism, on the other hand, has systemic power associated with it. That's why if, for example, reparations were to happen, okay, and the racial wounds were truly healed in this country, and I don't mean by like affirmative action or whatever the fuck, a Band-Aid solution that is feckless and liberal nonsense, but true material restitution occurred, okay, and centuries of racial wrongs were corrected. At that point, and that's like such an unimaginable scenario that it's hard to even like create it in your mind, I don't think people would care as much about the N-word. You abandoned the analogy about the Holocaust? No, I didn't. The Holocaust happened in the... Oh, God, I got to stop fucking pausing. Okay. Nazis threw Jewish people into concentration camps and systematically murdered them. They robbed them of their rights. They dehumanized them, okay, and robbed them of their rights in an interest to defend Volkish Germans, okay? Nazis in that regard, and the Volk was white. That's what whiteness was, okay? That's a real substitute for white in that situation. They said Volkish, but that was white, okay? Volk. Yes, other minorities and queer people and disabled people too, but for the sake of this argument, I'm using a reductive, a reductive description, okay? The Holocaust didn't happen on the virtue of Jewish people not being able to have consensual sex with, non-Jewish people. That's not how that happened. There is no real genocide when you talk about white genocide, because white genocide happens on the basis of white people, or whoever is considered white, which is a political term, having sex with non-white people, whoever is not considered to be a part of the group of non-whites. Okay? And the reason why I talk about this regularly, white people aren't real, question mark. We can't even get loan forgiveness. Reparations is a non-starter. True. White genocide is the existence of interracial couples? Yes. Yes, it is. Because whiteness and blackness in the United States of America are concepts that were created around power. Blackness, on the other hand, was utilized to dehumanize African slaves that were brought into this country. And it was protected with some rules that white people created, like the one drop rule, which is precisely why, like I said, no one looks at Barack Obama and says, that's a white guy. Okay? That's why they say shows are woke when they have non-white leads. Yeah. White people don't exist is your video I share the most with people, and it always blows people's minds. Yeah, there you go. If you want to understand this further, there's a really informative, very short 15-minute rant I had on this subject matter, and I think it really covers most of the things. But genocide is mass murder. How can this be murder? Exactly. It's hilarious to me that this is stuff a non-deranged society would be teaching to 5th graders, but you have to do it on Twitch to whole-ass adults. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is by design. Okay? That is by design. I know you spend a lot of time repeating points made in the past for new viewers. Do you think you change minds as a result? I think so. For every person that comes in here that agrees with all the other things I'm talking about, that gets very upset at me when they originally hear like a bastardized perspective that I have that I don't actually hold on to, but like is completely either A, clipped out of context, or B, really just butchered by an interlocutor. I try to have this conversation every single time and and demand, or rather beg, for charitability every single time, specifically because I think people will have their minds changed. And I think there are a lot of people whose minds I have changed, whether it be on transphobia, whether it be on even this issue. Which can't stop me from streaming. Oh, that's when I got banned. Yeah. I still think you're wrong on charter schools. Yeah, I'm definitely not wrong on charter schools. Wait, why'd you ban this guy? What? Don't ban this guy. Oh, you got timed out. The chatter was right, but it's also hilarious how many dudes my age are feigning outrage over the so-called white racism while also not realizing this is the first time in their life they've had to consider whether or not it exists because they never encountered it. Dumbasses. Yeah. I think ultimately this kind of conversation just moves us away, and it's incredibly stupid because it takes us away from things like healthcare for all, free education for all. And for all, I mean literally white people as well as black people as well as non-white people. Okay? It is a very divisive subject matter, and the only people that benefit from this are either the Nazis who want to do white identity politics, in the same way that SJWs, like the hyperventilating SJWs do, but this time they're doing it for white people, okay? Or the wealthy capital owners that benefit from the working class dividing amongst themselves and infighting. It's a very stupid conversation. When it comes down to it, if you want to hear my perspective on it, however, I will always give it to you. You're confusing charter with private? No, I'm not. Charter schools are even more nefarious than private schools because they take public funds away from public schools in a way that private schools cannot. So charter schools are literally, like, actually the middle of the ground solution to cripple the public school system in this country. And they are unregulated. Yeah, let's make 5th graders racist. You mean white people are allowed to be prejudiced, but that's not racist? Well, black people take nothing personally. Okay. This is the other side of the conversation for insulin dependent. I think this will help you understand it a little bit better. Because you were in the chat saying like, oh, well, people have no way of seeing this outside of a hyper individualistic sense. That's perfect. The N-word or anti-black racism is not about like one individual white person being individually racist to one individual black person or hurting one individual black person's feelings, right? That's why it's something that you have to discuss with historical context. Do you understand? I'm saying those white people who have an issue, not all people, but yeah, I agree. Do you get it? Because the moment that you look at racism as like individuals discriminating against other individuals, you are doing the Ben Shapiro argument without realizing it. That's why Ben Shapiro always says systemic racism does not exist. Hypothetically, only one person can be racist to another person. Individuals make up the system. Show me a racist person, and I will defend against that racist person every day of the week. That is a verbatim Ben Shapiro take. Okay? Because the moment that you fucking turn around and start talking about racism on the boundaries of individuals being racist to one another, you are dropping the historical context that is the fundamental underpinning of understanding what racism actually is and what white supremacy actually is in the United States of America. That's why, that's why I talk about this so frequently and try to pull back the conversation to a productive place. I'm saying that is one small and less significant subset of racism, and it's self-destructive towards class unifying to say it's permissible. I've never said systemic racism isn't real and the primary damage of racism in our society. No, I'm not saying you say that. Of course not. I see both sides, Hasan. I'm just trying to point out some contradictions that I see. Well, I hope you understood that then, because the moment that I talked about this is a concept that should be educated in 5th grade, you said, yeah, let's make 5th graders racist. Learning about slavery, learning about white supremacy, and learning about black existence in this country from the perspective of black people being humans and not just slaves until the abolition is not going to make racists. Okay? The opposite, avoiding that truth, is what creates racists, because it creates a system of people who are completely oblivious to the realities of black existence. It's the exact opposite. Unless you're literally saying like, oh, wow, I can't believe we're going to start thinking about black people as like full human beings, even when they were enslaved. That's really making me feel for the slavers here. That's just a self-report. If anything, it'll make you non-racist, which is precisely the reason why a lot of people want to stop that and have very effectively stopped that from being taught in schools. Florida being a great example of this. And the more nefarious thing that actually ties back to charter schools is what Ron DeSantis is doing, for example. He's utilizing and weaponizing anti-CRT and anti-woke legislation to currently undermine the already crippled public education system in the state of Florida. This is a legislation that is passing through the state legislature as we speak. It starts off with anti-woke ideology must be stopped. Woke ideology must be stopped, and moves into public schools that have this kind of common curriculum is going to have their funds pulled. If your argument was cut and dry, we wouldn't still be debating this. Not a simple issue. You think, wait, the argument is cut and dry. The reason why it's a debate, an ongoing debate, and not a simple issue is because we live in a white supremacist society. This society, this country, was built by slavers, white capital owners that wanted to preserve their power. And that attitude permeates through every facet of our existence, through every orifice. That is the reason why it's not a settled issue. And everything, basically, that I talk about, because I am, I guess, endlessly contrarian when we talk about a white supremacist capitalist organization of the economy, everything I talk about is not settled technically. People are always going to disagree with me. That's my job. My job is to try to get you to understand the opposing side. I have tried to personally show people the content to pull them away from the right, and your white racism takes push them further away, man. You are not changing people's minds by saying it's okay to hate them. I understand. And I know you are desperate to say, oh, optics in this regard. But you have to remember, some of these people, it's going to take a lot longer for them to recognize this. There are plenty of issues that I talk about that probably pushes people away, like transphobia. But I don't stop defending transphobia when people think, when people's immediate position is that like trans people are mentally ill and weird. That doesn't stop me from defending that perspective, defending that trans people deserve to live and be free. You know what I mean? Okay, stop. I said defending transphobia. You know what I mean. Fuck, man. Defending trans people. I misspoke. You fucking know what I mean. Shut up. It's going to push some people away, but it's also going to push some people away, but it's also going to get people to understand it. So Hasan has to be a white identitarian to bring people to the left. Isn't that paradoxical? Exactly. When we talk about racism, we never consider against whites in Brazil because racism is already an anti-black reference. I believe this is the greatest example of a power structure not yet bent to circumvent reality. As a white people don't deserve to be handled delicately when it comes to this issue. I don't think so. I think like you sometimes do have to appeal to the sensibilities of people. Okay? Which I try to do to the best of my ability. But there are certain lines that I'm not going to cross. You know what I mean? I do obviously try to cater myself, or I do try to cater to different types of audiences, but ultimately it doesn't matter because like when we talk about whiteness as a concept, when you try to remove systemic racism from that subject matter, and talk about like individual acts of discrimination or bullying, okay, and try to bring that conversation over to, try to bring that conversation and a conversation about racism, which everyone, regardless of what the dictionary